So it was wonderful to know that my great-great-grandmother, only two greats, was a signatory on the petition to enable women to get the vote. Yay, votes for women.
And you only found that out when you were in Parliament?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, my goodness.
No one ever talked about it. It was not in any of the letters or the little...
Welcome to FirstHand. I'm Tanya Unkovich, your host and a New Zealand First List MP. Join me and my guests as we explore the first-hand experiences and perspectives of New Zealand First and our journey to bring balance, experience and common sense to our politics. Today we're joined by Jenny Marcroft, List MP for New Zealand First and Under-Secretary for the Ministries of Media and Communications, as well as Oceans and Fisheries. Now, you'll have to excuse the noise behind me today. We've got some construction teams here working on new government buildings, all part of the exciting fun of being here in Parliament. This is FirstHand, the New Zealand First podcast. Hi, Jenny. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tanya. Great to be here.
So you're wearing multiple hats within New Zealand First. You're serving as a List MP, you're an Under-Secretary for Media and Communications, as well as Oceans and Fisheries. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're juggling all of these portfolios?
Well, obviously when you get portfolios as part of the government executive, the scrutiny steps up, the intensity steps up. But it's really a great way to transition from being just a backbencher with a range of portfolios into actually being part of that executive. So for me, it's obviously with media, that's my background, 30 years working in the media industry, so I'm fairly familiar with that topic. But in terms of oceans and fisheries, that's a new portfolio for me, so there's lots of learning for me to do. And recently I've been out into the Nelson region where there is a lot happening in the fisheries space, in the seafood sector, so I've really done a bit of a deep dive into that portfolio from the get-go.
I saw that. Lots of great images that you were sharing with us on what you got done there. So let's talk about something personal, your cats, Romeo and Leonardo. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them and how maybe they got their names? Are you interested in Shakespeare?
Well, actually, they are just really gorgeous little boys. They came to us as brothers when they were kittens, and my daughter wanted to name the cat, so we named one each. I named Romeo because he was my cat, and she decided to call her cat Leonardo.
Really cute. So, and also horses. You have a love for horses, a passion for horses. So tell us a little bit about that. And is it Princess Fifi? Is that your horse's name?
Well, we've got a couple of horses at the moment. My daughter is riding. She's also studying her master's in ag science with a focus on equine. So horses have always been a part of my life. Basically, horses saved me as a teenager through a really troubled period of time. It was my horse really that became the healing tool for me. So horses always been a part of my life. I've had family with racehorses and farms and horse riding, and all of that has been a really wholesome kind of upbringing. So obviously my daughter, I introduced her to horses from a baby. So she first rode when she was very tiny, before she could really walk. Oh, wow. So Princess Fifi is a little miniature horse. She's 32 inches high, so she's a little bit bigger than a Labrador, but she's about twice as round. She's a very gorgeous little pony, but because Lily's away at university, Fifi is being looked after at the Matakana Country Park by Patrick and Christine. So she has this wonderful life, sharing love and joy with all these little kids who come and have pony rides. And even though she's not so much a horse for riding, they love to groom her, they love to dress her up, put ribbons in her hair, all that sort of thing, and they just love and adore her. So she's in a really great place, and we get to go and see Fifi from time to time, but she's beautifully looked after.
Nice. No doubt you get photos sent when she's beautifully groomed. Is that right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And she's it's a funny thing having a miniature, because they are like these tiny things compared to a normal size horse, but they have full horse attitude. Oh. So they are just wonderful, wonderful companions.
Oh, wonderful. So teaching, now that's another facet of your life. You started off as a primary school teacher. So tell us a little bit about that and how you think education is going to look like in the future.
Well, I became a teacher straight out of school. I went off to Hamilton Teachers College, and that was a really great, introduction to tertiary education. Became a teacher. I went and did my first year teaching at Cambridge Primary School, and then I went off and did my OE like many people in the 1980s did. And I ended up teaching in London, and it was working in that environment that I realised actually teaching wasn't really for me. The system there was way behind what New Zealand's education system was. And when I came back to New Zealand after my OE, that was a period of time where there were actually no teaching jobs, unbelievably. They had a glut of teachers. So I actually fell into radio after that because I couldn't get a teaching job. But in terms of how do I see the future of education in New Zealand, I think personally we need really skilled, qualified teachers that have an absolute passion for being in the classroom and for their young people's learning. And while we do have a lot of that, I think partly the system doesn't enable quite enough creativity to enable all children to learn in different types of way, because not everyone learns the same. So the more that we can do that and be more flexible in our teaching, we cater for more learners. So my daughter's had a great education, and through the system she's been through, and she's now on the tertiary side of things, and I'm pretty pleased with what's currently happening at the moment for her.
Great answer, thank you. So let's get into broadcasting, Jenny. Any tips?
Well, I think the most important thing to note is that when you're using whatever medium it is, whether it's a Facebook Live or you're on the radio or on the television, the most important thing is that you've got to be relatable. And radio is really great for that because you don't have the distraction of cameras. You don't see the person you're talking to. You've got to imagine that actually that person, that one person is right there in front of you. So you're talking to that one person in a way that is relatable to them. You're being authentic. That's really the most important thing. So if you learn that particular skill, when you add in cameras and lights and, maybe a live audience as well, you've still got that ability to communicate directly to that one person, even if there's an audience of 100 or 1,000 or whatever. So that's the most important skill.
Interesting. That was the same bit of information I was given when I first started speaking. Someone said to me, forget about all of those people. Imagine there's one woman or one person in the audience and you are speaking directly to them and you are helping them. And that really changed things for me when I spoke, because I then didn't focus on everyone else and what do they think of me. You can so easily start thinking about yourself, right? But when you focus on that one person, it's such a great tool to use.
Absolutely. That's the first thing you learn in radio, is that you're communicating to one person. So you've actually got to imagine, who is that person? Is it someone in your family? Is it a close friend? And particularly if you've got an age group that you're broadcasting to, then that person has to be within that age generation. So it's a really cool technique. And if you, as you say, use that regardless of the environment you're in, you are going to be relatable. You are going to come across as authentic. And I think that's the most important thing. And of course, the distraction of, lights and TV and cameras and all of that sort of stuff is something that throws us off. One other thing I learned, which is a really cool trick, is one of the things that used to happen in radio quite a lot behind the scenes. I often did a lot of breakfast radio. So I'd be on with a host, and often during the times I'd be reading the news at the top of the hour or the bottom of the hour, the host would try and distract me from reading the news, make me crack up, make me, lose my place or whatever. One time, one of my co-hosts, John, decided he'd do a striptease while I was reading the news. So, you learn how to stay absolutely focused. Another time, someone else slapped a whole steak, a raw steak, whack on top of my news script.
Right.
You had to just keep on going.
Keep going.
Occasionally, very, very occasionally, though, you completely lost the plot.
Yeah, and understandable. I would with a piece of raw steak thrown in front of me. Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive a little bit into your broadcasting background, your past career. So how did your journey into iwi radio, especially My FM, and what was that like for you? How did it change for you and lead you then and help you into politics?
Well, I started off in Taupo at Hits and Memories Radio Lakeland, which was my first introduction to radio. From there, I bounced over to Hamilton to work at Kiwi FM, which broadcast coast to coast. From there, I knew that the next step was to go to Auckland, and I was looking for an opportunity there. I was contacted because they wanted a Māori woman to join Robert Rakatea on The Breakfast Show, and I was fortunate enough to be given that role. The difference that I found inside working in iwi radio, particularly for my FM in the beginning days, we didn't have large amounts of budget. We didn't have flash studios. I mean, we were in a building in Crummer Road that had literally egg cartons on the wall for soundproofing. We had old school chairs that were broken, and we never knew whether we were going to get paid that week. So it came with a lot of challenges, but equal amount of absolute heart for doing this brand new thing of iwi radio in a commercial environment and trying to break into that commercial market in Auckland at that particular point in time in the early 1990s. There were so many obstacles thrown in our way. Getting advertisers so that the money could come in the door. Actually, the other broadcasters not wanting us to be in the commercial environment. You know, who were these upstarts to think they could, these iwi could broadcast inside the commercial market? So there were a lot of interesting dynamics at the time, which just really helped us sort of put steel in our backbones to make it the success that it eventually became. Absolutely. So in terms of learning leading towards politics, it didn't come till much later for me, but what it did cement for me was always that it was so important as a broadcaster to get my pronunciation of Māori correct, and I took that upon myself, and that was the early 1990s. So it was unique to be in a broadcasting environment in the early 1990s that actually required us to get our pronunciation right. So in that time, you must also remember that radio hauraki was radio hauraki. You couldn't say hauraki on air. That was the environment at the time. It wasn't until much later, during much later in my career, that I became involved and interested in iwi politics.
It was a great radio station. I used to love their music in those early days. Fantastic. They played a lot of things that no one else would play.
No one dared to play them.
I know. No, I used to love them. They were funny as too.
Yeah, we had an amazing program director. His name was Ross Goodwin. He actually used to program Radio Hauraki, and he just had an incredible ear for a song that was going to become a hit. And we had great talent. The talent on that station was incredible.
And some of them have gone on to do great things, like yourself, of course.
Well, all of us have gone on to do great things.
Yes.
My name is Jenny Marcroft, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today for the State of the Nation.
Jenny, let's talk a little bit about your roots now. So you have roots in the Utakura Valley in Hokianga, in Northland. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with Northland.
Well, it comes from my father. So he was born in his grandmother's home, which has now become the Puketawa Marae, although that original home is no longer there. And he was born early 1920s, 1925, and that was at a time when there was a lot of trains going up and down the country. So his mum had been, the family lived in Nongataha in Rotorua, and she came home to Utukura to have her last baby. So that was my dad. So that's the connection there. There's a very strong spiritual connection to that place. When my father passed away, he died young at the age of 48, we sent up, my mother commissioned Don Binney, a New Zealand artist, to go and paint the urapa in the Utukura Valley, the Puketawa urapa. So that was a painting that we had on our walls. It was then gifted to the Rotorua Gallery so that it would be available for the public to see. And it's a most beautiful painting. It has a beautiful moko in the sky. And it was the first time Don Binney actually used any Māori imagery in any of his artworks. Mostly it was birds in the sky, but that was the first time he used it. It was a moko kauai in the sky. So that was the connection I had. And it wasn't until many, many years later that I was actually wanted to know where this painting had come from and what my connection to it was. So that took me back to the Utukura Valley, and I was much older by the time I went back there and found those connections.
Spirituality, it's very important to you. Tell us a little bit. You just touched on that now, so that's why I thought let's just talk about that a little bit.
Well, I was brought up as an Anglican, so church on Sunday was very part of our way of being. So that was my fundamental Christian upbringing. I also have had my grandmothers were very spiritual on all sides of my family. There has been very strong Māori spirituality as well, and then I have a Scottish heritage as well. So we know the Celtic kind of religious or spirituality that comes along there. So I have it from multiple streams. So I have a personal belief that we are a spiritual being having a human experience, and that's kind of my guiding force for how I work and operate in this life. And I believe that it's really important at this time of being in politics that I remember that and that I act from that place. I'm a luminous light being having this human experience. I'm in politics, and what can I do to help not just make people's lives better, because I think that's what we're all here to do, but to make things and changes that are really meaningful. And if I come from that spiritual perspective, then I know that that's the guiding light that's going to really help me to stay on the right path.
Ultimately, everyone wants meaning and purpose, don't they? And what a wonderful way to be able to do that.
Absolutely. So do I go to church much these days? I think church is all around us. Sometimes I'll go to a formal church. You can have church in many ways. So for me, it's about embracing the spirituality that is nature, that is people, that is community. And I think that's kind of the way that feels best for me and how I operate in life.
So talking again about the Hokianga, what are some of the key issues that you see in that area, and how do you want to shape the future there? How do you want to
housing,
advocate?
I think you have to start with for people to be well, for people to have good lives, you have to look at how are they housed. Is the home safe and secure, warm and dry? And that has been an issue. So that's been one of the driving factors of me coming into politics, was to shine a light on valleys like Utukura, and it's not the only one in the north or on the east coast. There are many that have high levels of deprivation, and I wanted to use my voice to highlight that. We now have a number of houses starting to be constructed, so once those are built, we believe that we'll have some houses ready to go by about July, August this year. Wonderful. So I'm really excited about that. I've taken a number of ministers into the valley to show them the plight of the situation over the first period of time I was in a parliament, in the 52nd parliament, and this time at the beginning of the year managed to get the Prime Minister there as well. So that's really shone a spotlight on the area. So I know under Minister Pōtaka that we've got real housing movement in the valley. So that's the starting point, growing an economic opportunity in the area as well. And once we're able to do that, people are able to take charge of their own destiny and take charge of their own lives. And I think housing is a good starting point.
Oh, wonderful. So Jenny, the ocean and kai moana are very important to the communities and the people of the far north. Tell us a bit about how your connection with the Hokianga informs and influences your approach to your work as Undersecretary for Oceans and Fisheries.
Well, I'd like to also add, not just the Hokianga, but I grew up with a beach house in Pukahina on the Bay of Plenty East Coast. So we grew up eating pipis and tuatuas and also fishing off the beach and in the estuary. So I have that childhood background and love of the ocean and love of gobbling up yummy seafood, as many of us have. So we need to ensure we have a sustainable resource. We also need to stop demonising those industries that are producing really good, clean protein that has a very low carbon footprint. And I think that's something that I might be able to add in terms of my role as the Undersecretary, is start changing that narrative about what the perception is around the fishing industry, because we are supplying huge growth to our GDP by having this seafood industry. The export market is potentially could grow multiple times. But the problem is we have a narrative that is forcing people not to want to engage in the industry. The industry themselves feel demonised. And I think we need to change that, because there are some great things being done. There's great ways that the sector has made changes to how they've operated in the past, and they've really grappled with a lot of this negativity that's been played out in the media. So if we can shift that narrative, then I think that'll be a really good thing, because the protein that is created from our seafood industry has great heart health implications. It's low in fat. All those omega oils are so beneficial to us. Not only that, but cognitive decline. If you're eating a lot of omegas, which you can get from the green lip mussel, then that's going to be great for us once we hit menopause, particularly, and get those achy knees as well. And it's anti-inflammatory. So there's some great benefits out of the seafood industry for us.
That's the information that needs to get out there, isn't it? A lot of people don't know that.
Absolutely. Why take a chemical pill if you can just scoff some mussels, I say.
I agree. So, talking about ministers, we all hear a lot about ministers, but not many people are familiar with the responsibilities of an undersecretary. Can you give us a little bit more information about that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that it's a work program which is directed from the minister. So I have a delegation under the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries. I have a separate delegation under the Minister of Media and Communications. Now, I have those work programs, but I also have a work program where I support the minister's work. So that's slightly different, whereas the minister has the full range of operating. I don't have any financial ability inside that portfolio. I don't direct the finances at all, so there's nothing I can do there other than make suggestions inside my delegation of what needs to happen there. So no financial responsibility. Also, I do have the responsibility, if the minister's not available for question time, to step up in their place. So could get a bit of heat in the future if I'm needing to answer questions in the House during question time. But really, it's a great transition kind of role into becoming a minister at some point.
Yes, wonderful. Reflecting on the accomplishments of the 52nd Parliament, 2017 to 2020, what do you think were some of those notable achievements?
Well, I don't think you can go past the Provincial Growth Fund, and under Shane Jones, the work that he did to get money, to get change, to get movement out into the regions was just outstanding. So that was a policy that we took into the 2017 election, rolled it out across that 52nd Parliament, made material difference into the communities. He got smashed over in the House, calling it a slush fund, but absolutely. Has it made a difference? Most definitely. When you go into communities around the north, you can see signs everywhere that money, that putia, made a difference. I was down recently in Opotiki. There was evidence there of the upgrade to the marae there, which is an absolute hub during Cyclone Gabrielle. When that came through, that marae upgrade managed to ensure that they could look after the community during that time. So everywhere around the country, you'll see evidence that policy of New Zealand First had major impact.
And it's not reported on that much, is it? Those wonderful achievements. The slush fund.
Not nearly enough,
no,
actually.
Not nearly enough.
So it's for us to tell the story.
Yes, yes.
Well, the new part is the part about the construction. We've got the Prime Minister's
Jenny, tell us your thoughts on the state of the media at the moment.
Well, firstly, must note how tough it will be for some of those staff that are going to be losing their roles or having their roles change on them. It is deeply upsetting, not just for themselves, but their families as well, because of the impact of suddenly losing your job. So that's first and foremost. I'm very concerned about that. Secondly, I'm really concerned about any young people that might be considering getting a career or stepping into journalism. What pathway will they see for themselves if we're just seeing a retrenchment inside our newsrooms in terms of journalism jobs suddenly disappearing? So that's a real concern for me. I have the delegation of workforce training under the Minister for Media and Communications. So I'm very mindful that if we don't have a really clear career pathway for our young journalists, then what are these people going to do? Because we need to have that pathway to ensure we have a pipeline of work and talent coming through. We don't want to get to the point in 5 years' time or 10 years' time where we haven't trained any journalists because they didn't want to join the industry because they saw no future for themselves. I'm very concerned about that and starting to work out what we can do to ensure not only are jobs sustainable in the industry, but there is a clear and definite career pathway for them.
Your advocacy for patients, their voice as far as the Farm Act policies go, it's commendable. So speak to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's really important that we show care and concern and make a material difference for those in our vulnerable communities. People who cannot access medicines because they're not being funded are vulnerable people. Many of them will lose their lives because we haven't funded a medicine that is funded in Australia or somewhere else in Asia or wherever, and they're having to leave the country or run Give a Little pages to get the medicines they need. So for me, it was a really important message that I could help deliver on their behalf, is that we need to relook at how Pharmac is funded, make sure that that funding process of analysing and assessing a medicine is truncated, because it can take up to 8 years for a medicine to be approved. That is ridiculous, particularly if that medicine had been approved in the Northern Hemisphere. Then why the heck was it taking so long in New Zealand? Also, our budget was way too low. The money we put into funding medicines, hardly enough. We need to really dramatically increase that. So I'm really pleased that the coalition agreement ensures that we will get regular increases into Pharmac's budget, and we will shorten the time MedSafe is going to be making those assessments on what's able to be funded.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about your great-great-grandmother. So women's suffrage holds a very significant, important part to you, doesn't it? Tell us a bit about that.
Edith Marcroft, she was an incredible woman. Shame I never got to meet her, because I think I would have really liked her. She was a woman who came out with her new husband in 1863 on the Matilda Wattenbach, and they set forth to this brand new place called Albert Land, which was north and west of Auckland. And I think the pioneering spirit of many of those women that came out on those early ships was just amazing. I mean, maybe they just didn't know what they were coming to, but they had this sense of adventure. During that sea voyage, she wanted to turn around because she didn't cope very well. She was pretty ill on board ship. But when she got here, she really settled into life and making a life for her and growing a family. She was the woman that played the piano in the church. She was the matriarch of a large family. And as I found out when I was in Parliament, she had signed the petition. So it was wonderful to know that my great-great-grandmother, only two greats, was a signatory on the petition to enable women to get the vote. Yay, votes for women.
And you only found that out when you were in Parliament?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, my goodness.
No one ever talked about it. It was not in any of the letters or the little book that we have on our family. It was never mentioned in that. So it was a wonderful surprise to have that connection at the 125th anniversary of women getting the vote in New Zealand. And at that stage, I was the 141st female politician.
Wow. Fantastic. Te rea, iwi, and te ao Māori. What does it mean to you personally to be Māori?
It's part of who I am. It's not how I grew up, but it is part of who I am. So it's part of my journey that I've undertaken myself to learn more about. Now, it's something that many people have been lucky to have grown up in it. I didn't, because of just my circumstances, and because my dad died so young, I didn't have that connectivity into the Māori world. So it's a journey I've had to take on my own, but it's been a really beautiful part of growing who I am as a person. So, yeah, I embrace all the parts of me.
Do you think that New Zealand First adequately represents Māori interests?
I think we've probably got the largest Māori caucus.
We have?
So I would say that would be yes, because there are multiple types of the way you can be Māori. I like to think that some of the work that I'm doing, I have a Te Ao Māori focus on. I think some of the things that I think about probably align with a Te Ao Māori perspective. My more spiritual side of myself probably aligns more greatly with a Te Ao Māori perspective. I don't put it into little pigeonholes. It's just all part of who I am.
Jenny, let's talk a little bit about life coaching. We're both life coaches. Why life coaching for you?
Because it's all about ensuring that you have the best, most fulfilled life, that you actually fulfill your destiny. And if you don't know what that destiny is, if you don't have a vision for it, you don't know where to go in your life. So for me, I've always had, multiple challenges as a young person, and I overcome them. I became successful, had a fantastic career. I've got an amazing daughter. I wanted to learn more about how I was able to tap into something that enabled my success despite my circumstances and early upbringing. So I found a program that I really resonated with and became a life mastery consultant as a result of that. I used all the tools that I learned in the program. I wanted to teach myself the program, which enabled me to get back into Parliament because I followed all of the tools of my program.
And
so
here you are.
I was the test case dummy.
I wouldn't say dummy, but...
so that I could go out and teach this program.
Fantastic.
Which I'm not doing right at the moment because obviously I'm back in Parliament as a result of doing the program myself.
Well, you're just leading by example. You're pretty much waving the flag and saying, hey, this works, just do it. You have to actually just do it, right?
Yeah, and it's all about specificity. That's probably the key to the program that I do is if you know your vision, you have to have absolute specificity about what it is. You have to have faith that you will get that. You have to sensorize and emotionalize that vision as if it's happening right now. And when you can combine all of those elements, then actually you attract to yourself that result.
Magic happens.
Absolutely, magic happens. Serendipity, magic, whatever you want to call it, divine intervention. I wouldn't call it luck because I don't think luck has anything to do with it, but you can achieve incredible results when you know what is your destination.
And sometimes you need a coach walking beside you to help you work out those things.
Absolutely. I think coaches are fantastic. They're totally underrated. Having a coach, having a mentor, I mean, people in sports do it all the time. Why do you think they are so successful? Most of it is the mind game. Getting control of the mind and the monkey of the mind that flips you off your path, off track, and life does that all the time. If you're able to get back in control of what's going on in your head, you do have success.
And you are a living example. I was personally pushed into being a life coach because
Really?
I had to be, really, because I was at a point in my life where I was going, okay, you can sink now, or you can look forward, make a decision on what you want, make a decision to point in that direction and do whatever it takes to get there. But sometimes life puts you into a position where you've got no choice, right? And that was how I actually started studying to be a life coach. I'd already become a therapist, and that's looking back. I didn't want to look back anymore, but life coaching, you have to look forward, and that's the key, isn't it?
I think there's something really important that you said that I want to pick up on. I think you always have a choice. If we think we don't have a choice, actually, you do have a choice.
Most people don't realise that actually the choice is theirs.
And that's where the power is,
Yes.
right? In making that choice.
Yes. So, Jenny, as we wrap up, what are your aspirations for the remainder of this Parliament?
Well, when you say remainder, we've only just begun.
I know.
We've got a lot of work.
Fast, though.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think that if we can make some broad change, if we can get the finances under control, if we can get some economic growth happening, then we can really look at what are the social things that we can afford to pay for. Because for me, social investment is really important. You know, you can't do social good unless there's money in the bank to do it. So for me, to have that really good balance, we have to get both things right. So that for me is what I would think is success at the end of this term, is that we've got a good balance of social good and good fiscals.
And if we keep going the way we are, then we will achieve that.
Also, if we've got a fourth estate that we can be proud of, that'll be great too.
Bonus. Thanks so much, Jenny. It's been a great interview. Thank you for joining us on this episode of FirstHand, the New Zealand First podcast. As always, we love to hear from you, so please send us your questions and comments and be a part of the dialogue shaping the future of our nation. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more. Until then, I'm Tanya Unkovich, and this is FirstHand. Take care.